Playoff football in Happy Valley. It almost still seems surreal until we actually see this 12-team playoff with games on campus, and this one of the most historic places that we could envision in December of seeing playoff football. SMU at Penn State. We got Marty Leap here to break it down for us. Of course, join Marty on Penn State Rivals. Marty, good to see you. But before, of course, we break down the actual playoff matchup against the Mustangs, we're going to have to talk about the situation that came down on Monday concerning Beau Pribula. So backup quarterback who hits the transfer portal. Therefore, there's a conflict because we got an overlap of a team that doesn't know how long it's going to be playing football, wants to be playing until January 20th with a transfer portal and the start of classes, enrollment, winter workouts, all those other things at a new school. So we've seen other players who have hit the transfer portal for playoff teams, but they had insignificant roles, special teams guys. Here we've got a guy who's not just a typical backup quarterback, which obviously would be a concern for anyone because you're one play away. But here's a guy that gets his 8 to 12 plays a game in specialty packages, red zone situations, all that, who is a key element of this offense. And as he posted on X earlier today, he's been a Pennsylvania kid, a Penn Stater his whole life, spent 3 years, wanted to be a part of the team through this playoff run, but he's kind of caught in the middle.
Yeah, and this is where I think the calendar, and I'm assuming that moving forward, we're going to see adjustments to the calendar. You know, we've seen this year with the 12-team playoff and the transfer portal and all of that. It really causes issues because if you're Beau Pribula, you know, you could have stayed with the team through the playoff. Preston Stone at SMU, ironically enough, is doing that. But I also think Beau Pribula and Preston Stone are probably in two very different categories in terms of how much they're going to be desired and pursued in the portal, right? I think Beau is probably a guy who is going to land on a Power 4 team as a starting quarterback. So he can't spend, as bad as to say, he can't spend or essentially waste his time these next however many weeks prepping for playoff games to be used in packages, which is super unfortunate. Especially like you said, a kid who grew up in Pennsylvania, Penn State fan, but it's a byproduct of the system we have. And yeah, it's really unfortunate for him. And, you know, I'll be curious with Penn State. Like you said, he's part of this offense. Now, if they're going to go on a run in the playoff and win a national championship or make a run at it, it's going to be on the arm of Drew Allar stepping up and playing great football. It was always going to be that way. It's still going to be that way. But, you know, some of those red zones, some of those short yardage situations where you could go to Beau and get those 2-3 yards with an extra blocker. Curious to see how that shakes out. Maybe we see more of the Tyler Warren package. I don't know, but that's where I'll be very interested to see how this shakes out against SMU. And then if you're Penn State, you hope against Boise State and beyond.
So I can think of 3 different paths we need to go on to address this situation. So let's go. Path number 1 is Drew Allar coming back for 2025. That is not necessarily something that I give a lot of thought to, but I just expected he would go into the NFL draft. How surprised were you?
Yeah, I mean, coming into the year, I definitely expected it. I mean, you see a quarterback with the high school ranking of Drew Allar, and you immediately assume, hey, you're going to have this kid for 3 years and make the most of it. But as the year went on, there started to be more and more buzz, more and more speculation coming out of the Lash building and coming out of Penn State circles that Drew was seriously considering returning for his senior year. And then obviously when Beau Pribula hit the portal Sunday night, I think everyone saw the writing on the wall. And then I think it was Pete Thamel who first reported it Monday that Drew did plan on returning. And then Drew took to Twitter with his own statement where he didn't necessarily say he was returning, but it just, hey, we're focused on the team right now, yada, yada. But then James Franklin in his press conference on Monday afternoon did say about Drew coming back next year. So yeah, he'll be back. It's definitely surprising. I think if you followed along the message boards and things of that nature for Penn State the last month or so, it's probably not a total shocker to you. But yeah, it's definitely a pleasant surprise for Penn State where I don't think they ever anticipated getting 4 years out of Drew Allar when they signed him out of high school. And now here you are. It looks like you're pretty set. You're going to get 4 years. I think the only way at this point you don't get 4 years is if he just goes on such a tear in the playoff, he can't say no to the draft. And if he goes on that kind of a tear, there's a good shot you win it all. And I think you would take that trade-off of having to scramble a little bit of quarterback for next year if it wins you a college football playoff.
with as long as Sean Clifford stuck around, Penn State becoming and then of course Trace McSorley before that, it's becoming the Green Bay Packers version of on the college scene. You know, Brett Favre's there for 20 years, Aaron Rodgers is there for 16 or 17 years, where they only have two quarterbacks forever. Disputed national champions, folks. It's a great look at 1990s college football, and it's so much more than that. A historical look, but it's not a history book. It takes you into the 12-team playoff as well. Disputed national champions is right on Amazon. So the next path I wanted to go on, Marty, of course, was Ethan Grunkemeyer and his capabilities, because we don't want to see it happen. But if he needs to step on the field, what can we expect?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're Penn State, you don't have to go to Grunkemeyer in the playoff. I will say, though, he is a player that the staff is extremely high on. There has been a lot of buzz that he is ahead of progress for Penn State, which may have also somewhat factored into Beau Pribula's decision, where I think even if Drew went pro, this wasn't going to be as simple as, you know, it was when Clifford went pro. Okay, Drew, you're the guy. It wasn't. There was going to be a legitimate quarterback battle between him and Grunkemeyer. You know, Grunkemeyer was a high 4-star guy, very talented, and elite 11 quarterback. I would have to double check, but I think, you know, the modern recruiting service, so going back to 2000, Grunkemeyer is behind only Allar and Hackenberg in terms of rating of quarterbacks Penn State assigned. May have been behind Anthony Morelli as well to go in the Wayback Machine. But regardless, he's got a ton of talent. He's a guy the staff thinks has a very bright future. Obviously, you hope that future now is not until 2026. And, you know, you can let him get the Beau Pribula treatment next year of getting mop-up duty and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, God forbid you would have to go to him in a playoff game. You would have a lot of concerns, but his talent and his ability would not be a concern.
All right, Marty, the next path I'm going to go on this quarterback situation would be, of course, the coaches are making the decisions that they think is best for the team in that situation. So when Pribula comes in for Drew Allar, and it's either a 3rd and 1 or a 4th and 1 or something like that, but correct me if I'm wrong, because you've got, of course, knowledge of every play of the entire season versus me watching Penn State 7 or 8 times and just trying to think back. There were other times where Pribula was the choice on like a 1st down, let's say in the red zone. So it wasn't always just like 3rd and 1. And of course, the thought from the fan base, the second guessing, is always, if that play doesn't work and it's 2nd and 10, you got Drew Allar trotting in from the sideline, you're like, oh, well, he's in a hole and he didn't need to be in a hole. Why did they take him off the field? So at least there's not this second guessing as to when do they use him? When don't they use him? Is this putting Drew Allar in a bad spot where he's playing all the plays?
Yeah, I think that's very valid, because there was definitely times this year it was kind of frustrating where you'd see Drew get into a rhythm, you know, hit 2-3 throws in a row, get 25-30 yards on those throws, and they're going tempo, and then they go to the Beau package and you get stuff for 1 yard or no gain, and then the whole drive kind of got set back. So I do think there's some validity to that. And, you know, you mentioned the red zone at times. They would go to the Beau package first on 1st and goal or whatever it may be. They may still do that, but I think it'd be more the Tyler Warren package. And honestly, in the past few weeks, you kind of started to see more and more of the Tyler Warren package over the Beau Pribula package in situations where typically you would see Pribula. So I don't know if that was just they felt more comfortable with it. Maybe it was trying to pad stats for Warren as they were really trying to get him to New York as a Heisman finalist. I don't know. But I don't think there's going to be a huge impact on this team the way some people have, you know, in Penn State fandom circles have painted out to be. And I understand the argument, well, if Drew gets hurt, there's a big difference between having Beau Pribula and Grunkemeyer, who has not played a snap. And I agree with that. But again, like I said at the top of the show, if they're going to make a run, which I think they're capable of, especially with the seeding they got, it's going to be on the arm of Drew Allar. So if he would have gotten hurt, it doesn't matter if you have Beau Pribula behind him or not. I don't think the team is going anywhere without Drew Allar anyway. So I don't think it's going to have a huge impact this year in the playoff the way some Penn State fans think it may. And a big part of that is having that Tyler Warren package, because that really helps, because where that Beau package was so effective at times, you know, 1st and goal at the 9, and you can run that Beau package and quickly make it 2nd goal to 3, or, you know, hey, we need 1 or 2 yards. You can do the same thing with Tyler Warren out of the Wildcat. It helps that Warren can throw the ball and has thrown it, because due to that, defenses can't just completely sell out to stop the run either if they go to the Tyler Warren package. So I don't think an X and O's wise it's going to have a huge impact on this team in a playoff.
We've got Marty Leap on the line, breaking down Penn State football for us. Join Marty on Penn State Rivals for the complete breakdown of the Nittany Lions. Of course, the National Signing Day class just came in about a week ago. Transfer portal news constantly, and of course, the playoff prep for SMU. I'm going to go with one more quarterback narrative on this one because Allar, I don't know that he's getting as much credit as he deserves for how much he improved this year. Like, we all knew he could sling it. That was from day one. You're not a 5-star if you can't sling it. And he would show us that at times, but truly in the best games. And of course, the Ohio State, Michigan games of 2023 got a lot of attention and what he wasn't able to do. And he seemed tentative and all those things. But man, he really cut it loose for most of this season. And in particular, the Big Ten championship game, the play comes to mind where he's getting grabbed by the neck. And I think it was a 4th down play. And he slung that bullet into tight coverage at the goal line for a touchdown. I just think the guy's about as good as anybody in the country now. And he's really stepped up as a vocal leader. He seems to be very animated on the field a lot, demanding, certain plays or certain situations that they stay on the field and all that. He seems to really kind of grown into himself.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think that's a big reason why this team is sitting here, getting ready to host a home playoff game and coming off a trip to Indianapolis. It's just the raw stats alone tell you it. His average yard per attempt is up by 2 yards from last year. His average yard per completion is up by almost 2 yards. His QB rating went from 136 to 161. His completion percentage is up 10 points. And the confidence is a big part of it. And you saw it from the first game of the year against West Virginia. I remember a play where he stiff-armed Josiah Trotter for a first down and then gets right in his face as John with him. Like, you never would have seen that last year. And I go back to 2 games in particular, and you mentioned one of them, the Big Ten championship game. Without this version of Drew, that the steps he takes, they don't beat USC because that second half, excuse me, it was a lot of grip it and rip it from Drew Allar, and he was tremendous. And he did it by overcoming interceptions he had thrown earlier in the game. And you mentioned that Oregon game, they got in that big hole, and they were very close to coming all the way back. And the reason they were able to fight back and start going score for score with Oregon in the second half was the play of Drew Allar. So, yeah, and I think that's where, if you're Drew, that's part of that incentive to come back, right? Because I don't think no matter what would happen between now and the end of the year, he's not going to jump Shedeur Sanders. He's not going to jump Cam Ward on draft boards. He comes back. He's got a legit shot to not just be QB1, but to potentially be 1-1 next April. And, that's a big difference in the money as well between being that high in the draft and maybe late first, early second round. So I think that's a big incentive too for why he, looks like he'll be back next season.
Folks, the Amazon link's in the description section of this video and all the videos. And what you do there is you just use the Amazon link that we provide, and it's the same exact shopping experience. It doesn't cost you a penny. You contribute to the channel because they take a portion and give it to us. So we appreciate that. And it doesn't change what you do on Amazon. It keeps all your stats and everything intact. Got Marty Leap breaking down Penn State football for us, taking on SMU, of course. This SMU bunch, they didn't necessarily win any games that were that impressive. Their best wins were Duke, Louisville, those kind of teams. But they also didn't have anyone roll on them this year by any stretch. They lost 2 extremely close games to BYU and Clemson. So they played respectable football start to finish. What are your initial impressions of SMU?
Yeah, I mean, and first off, you mentioned those losses by 3 points to BYU, by 3 points to Clemson. Well, Clemson's the ACC champion in the college football playoff, and BYU finished with 10 wins. So, those are 2 really good football teams also they had close losses to. I think they're a really good offensive team, obviously. That, offense led by Kevin Jennings, and they made that switch early in the year. Honestly, if they would have done it sooner, they probably would have beaten BYU and wouldn't have been sweating it out on Selection Sunday, whether or not they ran over Alabama. But yeah, I think it's an explosive offense. I think Kevin Jennings is one of the best quarterbacks Penn State has faced this year, which, definitely presents its own challenges in itself. They have a tremendous running game. Yeah, I think it's going to be a good challenge for Penn State. I think last I saw the line was, 9.5, which for a game in Happy Valley, especially if you look what the weather's going to be on Saturday for a team coming up from Dallas, I think that's fair. But, I think this is a game, if you're Penn State, you can't come out and play your C game and expect to win unless SMU, makes some mistakes along the way. You've definitely got to play a good, clean game on Saturday to get out of there to win, because I think Penn State's better than SMU at home. Like I said, I think they're probably about 10 points better. But SMU is a really good football team. You don't make the college football playoff and not be a good football team. So I think the offense is going to give them a lot of challenges. Very curious to see Tom Allen in this defense. They're going to be motivated after what happened against Oregon, because they had played so well all year, including shutting down a very good Ohio State offense, and then just got sliced and diced by Oregon. So I'll be very curious to see the response from them. I think they'll be a very motivated group. And, there's been some people in Penn State circles who've been critical of Tom Allen this year, but I don't think you can question how good of a defensive coach the guy is. So you give him 2 weeks to prepare for an opponent, and I'm confident they'll have a good game plan. But on the other hand, Rhett Lashley's a heck of an offensive mind also. So giving him 2 weeks to prepare for an opponent, you can say the same thing. So I think it'll be a really good game. SMU, like I said, great quarterback in Kevin Jennings, super explosive offense. It's a defense I think is good, but a defense I think Penn State can exploit in some spots. So, should be a fun one on Saturday.
Yeah, they've got a 1,300-yard rusher in Brashard Smith, 14 touchdowns. He got 35 passes out of the backfield. They've got a number of weapons on the outside, not one particular star. R.J. Daniels is their leading receiver, but just a bunch of guys with 35, 40 catches. And Matthew Hibner is a decent tight end. And you mentioned the defense. All their metrics are strong. They're in the top 10 in the nation in yards per play given up. Their total yardage is around 25th or 30th. And they picked off 15 passes, which is number 15 in the country. So yeah, they play defense. Now, I don't know if I think there's an assumption, the stereotype would be Penn State could bully them up front and push them around a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a fair assumption to think is possible. Because, if you just go back to the Big Ten championship game, I think Oregon's front seven might be the best in the country. And Penn State's offensive line, really after the first series, just pushed them around that entire game. I thought that was one of the best games I've seen from a Penn State offensive line when you consider the opponent in quite a while. And we've talked all year about how good this Penn State defensive line is. So I don't think it's unreasonable to think Penn State can bully them around and push them around up front. I think if you're going to win this game, if you're Penn State, that's part of the recipe is your offensive line's going to come out, take care of business, and just push SMU around. And your defense, I think early downs needs to do the same thing so that you can get them into those obvious passing situations where you can unleash Abdul Carter, you can unleash Denai Dennis Sutton, you can unleash Zane Durant, and let them go get Kevin Jennings. But yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable to go into this game with the expectation that Penn State's capable of pushing them around up front.
And I know Kaytron Allen always runs hard, but there just seemed to be a little bit more fire in the belly against Oregon. Man, he ripped off some impressive runs.
Well, I don't think it's coincidental in his press conference today. James Franklin made sure to go out of his way to mention that both he and Nicholas Singleton are the healthiest they've been since early in the year, and they both looked it against Oregon, especially Kaytron Allen. That was some vintage Kaytron Allen stuff. And if you're going to get that version of those two backs with what we've seen from Drew Allar this year with what the offensive line did against Oregon, you're going to be a very tough out in the playoff.
Good stuff out of Marty Leap. Please check out his work on Penn State Rivals. And, of course, it's going to be a whiteout, noon Eastern. I'm sure the faithful would have liked a night game, but are we looking at, mid to high 20s? And
I looked earlier. I live about 60 miles west of State College. So State College is usually 2 to 3 degrees warmer than here. The high for me on Saturday is 20. At noon, it looks like it's going to be about 17. So you're probably looking low 20s. Like if this thing would have been a night game, you'd be talking like Lambeau Field in the playoff kind of coldness. But it's going to be cold on Saturday, and I don't think that should be overlooked, right? I think when you talk about the playoff and earning this home game in the first round, that's part of the advantage if you're a Penn State, where you have this team coming up from Dallas. SMU's schedule, I pulled it up in front of me here. They played at Virginia on November 23rd. And I don't know what the weather was like in Charlottesville on November 23rd, but I'm sure it wasn't that cold. Other than that, every other game they played was either in the state of Texas, in the state of California, or in the state of North Carolina this year. So this is a team that probably is not used to this. Penn State, this is everyday life in State College in the winter. So to these guys, it's nothing else. So I do think that is probably a legitimate factor and a legitimate home field advantage for Penn State on Saturday.
There we go. SMU and Penn State, two teams we didn't necessarily expect to see playing in the college football playoff, but it could be an interesting matchup for the opening of a 12-team playoff, a historic time. Marty, appreciate you being here. Enjoy the game.
Absolutely, Mark. You too. Hopefully next week at this time, we're here talking about Penn State and Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl.